Yo, hey guys, this is coming on you with a little rack pan from the Team USA shirt or whatever it's like there from Key West or something. Wow, did you see the jib move there, Padme? Okay. Anywho, I figured I'd treat you to a delightful reading. An exceptionally silly reading of the last couple chapters of, well, Isaiah. Next, buddy about it, Jeremiah. I stayed away from this because a couple reasons, really. I don't want to read it. It's not that. I don't know. I have a strong, I feel compelled that for some reason I should read 5 or 6 or 7 chapters of Isaiah's buddy by Jeremiah, who didn't know him, and they came from 100 years after Jeremiah did. So Isaiah came first. He's in the time of Hezekiah and the Assyrians, with the Sennacherib thing, and they get Israel, but they do not get Judah at that point in time. And then there's this one where Nebuchadnezzar comes and finishes the deed, and he gets Judah because they're just as mean about it. In fact, they're worse in their harlotry ways than Samaria at this point. So says God and Ezekiel about it. So. And the outline is very interesting for Jeremiah because the whole thing kind of goes chronologically in a way, ish, until you get up to chapter 40. Basically right on up until you get up to chapter 45 is kind of the story of what happens, and they get Jerusalem and all the stuff, right? And and Jeremiah's stories and his crazy prophecies, and his life sucks about it. The book of Jeremiah is more like the state thing, and then Lamentations is more like Jeremiah's church, I think, is really what it is. With the Lamentations or whatever, and you can tell from the book of Daniel that whatever happened to Jerusalem was not a regular ransacking of a city. They were mad about a rip-off deal, I bet. They were supposed to be friends, right? And there's Palpatine stuff about it with the Baal worship. It's gotten out of control. They don't have smart kings in Judah either these days, or really ever, but even Josiah's grandkids disappoint, or whatever, even the children. So anyway, I don't know why they just always turn to do evil. They did not do as their father did. Instead they did as their grandpa did. So 45 anyway. Then he gets hauled off to Egypt, because at the end of it, there's the story of Jeremiah. The saga continues, and he meets up with a bunch of people who are outcasts, and because they let him go. The Babylonians let Jeremiah go. They don't, oh yeah, go ahead. They kind of even know him a little bit. They're not mad at the pious ones, the 1 or 2 prophets who escaped death. They are mad at the Jews, you know what I mean? So at any rate, even Yahweh is mad and says, I will cause my servant Nebuchadnezzar to come, and he'll slaughter you people mightily. And he did. He was nasty about it. And then anyway, long story short, God says, hey, you can still have a remnant here. Even the Babylonians say so. Just do this, and make sure you don't go to Egypt. Do not go to Egypt. If those people go to Egypt, they'll die, and you won't have it'll be completely desolate in Jerusalem. So he tells them, and then yada yada yada, they confer, and then they haul Jeremiah off with them to cower in Egypt, where certain death awaits, because he even just, what did I just say about the don't go to Egypt, So then there's an assurance to Baruch in chapter 45, once they're in Egypt or whatever, because he's lamenting it with them, how could they something to that effect. And then there's chapter 46, where the word of the Lord, which came to Jeremiah the prophet against the nations, against Egypt, concerning the army of Pharaoh Necho, king of Egypt, which was by the river Euphrates in Carchemish, and which Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, defeated in the 4th year of Jehoiakim, the son of Josiah, king of Judah. Right? So, that's obviously about back then. And it's a thing against Egypt, and then Babylonia will strike Egypt. The word of the Lord, like how spoke to Jeremiah the prophet, how Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, would come and strike the land of Egypt, declare in Egypt, blah, 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 and proclaim in Migdal. And he just, the usual. It goes, this. Jeremiah is pretty much also just a big, long rant. Most of the prophet, but it's just like God yells at people. So then we were coming to the end of chapter 46. And this is where it really gets interesting. I'm even going to read that. But like what I'm going to read is 47 to the end. And 47 is a short chapter. The last one's a short chapter. But like 48 and 50 are really long. And 51 and 49 are like pretty long. And that's really it. I mean, then there's a little bit in 47. And there is like the tail end. But the structure is interesting because like right here, the part I will read first, from verse 25 of chapter 46 to verse 28. So I guess the last 4 verses of this chapter 46, that's what I'll read. It is still talking about back then, but the language he uses for verses 27 and 28, where God will preserve Israel, is very similar language as Yah likes to do to what he says in chapters 30 and 31, which I posted by text, and maybe at some point I'll read. But like in the real X files, the prophecy X files, with the Jeremiah in chapter 30 and 31, I think it was a Sunday school is cool, like lesson, maybe number 5, episode 5 perhaps, unless I remember it incorrectly. Maybe it was episode 7 or something. I don't know. Whichever one it was. So, could have been 3 even. Like something like that. It was one of them. I think it was 3 actually. Episode 3. It's not marked. It just says like, it doesn't say season 2, episode 3. But it is. So, that. Right? So there's language in here that harkens back to that, which is obviously not something he is talking about from, it's the latter days. But even here, he is drawing a parallel between that one and this one back then, the first time, like when Nebuchadnezzar got it, and using the same language, because he's going to say, like, well, whatever he says, it's a very similar language, right? And then that's it. Then it gets into these like back into like this one last rant prophecy about like the whole earth one from chapters 47 verbatim right on up till towards the end. Chapter 51 and 52, I believe. And I mean, one should just pay attention to the verbatim outline of it, because I think God's kind of clever. Even Jeremiah is probably a little clever. Because chapter 50, he's, judgment on Babylon, Babylonia. But, like, because there's something about Babylon did do that to the temple and all that. And it's just one of the ones that, like, he derides. He starts chapter 47, the whole thing starts with like judgment against Palestine, because it's Philistia, and that's the Philistines, or the Palestine. And then it's the usual. He just goes around, the region, Moab, Ammon, whatever. It's obviously like not thrilled with Jerusalem. And then there's chapter 51, the utter destruction of Babylon. Chapter 50 is a really long one. Or was it 51? That's the really long one. It's this one. Well, it was one of them. And then you get right on up until the last chapter, where it gets interesting. Because that's it. That's all it is. Like, it ends at chapter 51. And then there's this strange chapter 52, where it's the fall of Jerusalem reviewed. And it's one chapter where now they've gone back, even though this part is in like other parts of Jeremiah where it happens like in real time. Now he's gone back. He's made it to Egypt. You have no idea what becomes of him. You get one last prophecy about like end time stuff, or I would argue like kind of like it's all connected, and you can tell because the word of the Lord comes to him, and then like it keeps going until you get to the fall of Jerusalem reviewed. It's like one final like thing about it where he goes off on like the whole earth at one point, you know what I mean? And like when it's the whole earth at one point, it's all connected like that, and you're like, it's pretty clear that like he's just mad about it. It's like it's like drawing a parallel in a way, and he even does that with his words. And then chapter 52 is just the fall of Jerusalem reviewed, the temple and city plundered and burned, the people taken captive to Babylonia. And that's it. Jehoiakim released from prison because, like, wow, his life is so great now. But, like, compared to what it was, yeah. But, I mean, I think they poked his eyes out and did a bunch of mean things like that. Like, you know what I mean? So, and then it just goes right into, Jeremiah's, like, church, which is the book of Lamentations, written by Jeremiah, and that's just 5 chapters, and it's just, like, it's Psalms, but it's Lamentations. He's mourning, like, the loss of Jerusalem, because it's toast. And they just wouldn't listen. Not even told them, they won't listen. It's not quite like this one, because, like, at the end, like, he's screwed. You have no idea what happens to him. I mean, did he get out of Egypt? Did he come back? You don't know. I mean, it doesn't say. I mean, it's funny because they like, what did I just say about like, don't go to Egypt? You heard what the guy said? Anyway. So that's what I'm going to read, right? I'll do it as a second clip so I can take my time and post this part as the intro. But I will read that last bit in this one as like the end of the little lesson. So here, I'm going to go back. I told you I'm not going to get into the structure of like the whole outline of Jeremiah, but it is something akin to that, where it's like a mishbag of like, goes through his early life, you know, how his family screwed him over and lied and did the Palpatine Baal cult about it, because it seems to be a theme with the Canaanite ones where they gotta like stab their own family members in the back just to do it if they're like upright. They don't like upright. They like fires of Molech, and they don't like, you know, uprightness and righteous behavior, or like, you know, to listening to Yahweh basically. Or even like laws. They don't like, they have no shame. Like they don't even do it in secret. They just go right out and do it. Kind of like how you people do, except they didn't have like public cameras, so they didn't even really have to like hide it that bad or whatever. Anyway, no, we gotta like change this, because us humans are like, could do better, but we don't want it. We don't do that. We want to manipulate everything. You don't understand. There's whirlwinds about it. All right, so there was the assurance to Baruch or whatever, right? The judgment on Egypt, and Babylonia will strike Egypt via Nebuchadnezzar, and it's clearly like about that one. And so it's interesting because right after this, it's going to morph into a different one altogether, where the word of the Lord comes to him, and it's like a new one, not like a continuation of the last one. And so coming out of chapter 46 of Jeremiah, the last 4 verses, here we go. The Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, says, Behold, I will bring punishment on Ammon of No, and Pharaoh and Egypt, with their gods and their kings, Pharaoh and those who trust in him. And I will deliver them into the hand of those who seek their lives, into the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, and the hand of his servants. Afterward it shall be inhabited as in the days of old, says the Lord. Right? So that was back then. Nebuchadnezzar is going to destroy it, just like Jerusalem, but like not quite with that gusto, but he's gonna wreck Egypt. And afterward it shall be inhabited as in the days of old. Because God knows about them. Like they're being bad about it. Nebuchadnezzar was a mighty king, used him to like slaughter all kinds of people. Did you know that? He liked them. I mean, he was a blunt tool, but like he wasn't quite like Sennacherib or whatever about it. He hated that guy. But he didn't mind Nebuchadnezzar, even though he was like, he was a warmonger for sure. But I mean, like, he wasn't that bad. Anyway, it's my opinion on it. I don't know. So the last two verses are about God will preserve Israel. And this is back then, but it perfectly mirrors what he says in chapters 30 and 31 about the latter days. You'll consider it, right? So these are the last two verses. After he says, so afterwards it shall be inhabited as the days of old, says the Lord, about Egypt. Back then, after Nebuchadnezzar does this. But do not fear, O my servant Jacob, and do not be dismayed, O Israel. For behold, I will save you from afar, and your offspring from the land of their captivity. Jacob shall return, have rest, and be at ease. No one shall make him afraid. Do not fear, O Jacob, my servant, says the Lord, for I am with you. For I will make a complete end of all the nations to which I have driven you, but I will not make a complete end of you. I will rightly correct you, for I will not leave you wholly unpunished. And that's how that one about back then ends. And it's clearly a prophecy about like recent future, like gonna happen stuff. Like if you're them and like concerned with what did the prophet say? It's not one for like latter days. But yet you see like God does not change and like pretty much verbatim says the same thing to them that he would still say right now because they just, I guess they don't understand. He's not duped by lip service and he won't change because like, you're banned now. You broke ban. He'll just say the same crap, right? Like verbatim. And then right afterwards, it's going to go to what we're going to read right in the next clip after I click post on this or whatever. And that is the word of the Lord that came to Jeremiah the prophet against the Philistines before Pharaoh attacked Gaza. Savvy? What does that mean? Then it goes into chapter 48. And it's just continuous. It says, against Moab, thus says the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, woe to Nebu, for it is plundered, right? That's Moab. Now, does he play by the same rules as us with respect to what he calls the territory that is like the name of the country at the time? He knows what it is to him first, you know what I mean? If he doesn't like Moab like people then, like if you're bad about it now, he's not going to like it, all right? Then there's judgment on Ammon. It says it's continuous. It just says, against the Ammonites, thus says the Lord, has Israel no sons? Has he no heir? He goes on, right? Hear me out. Now, it just keeps going. Wail, O Heshbon, O Ai is plundered. Cry, you daughters of Rabbah. I mean, he's going off about something, right? Then it's Damascus against Damascus. It's continuous. Hamath and Arpad are shamed, for they have heard bad news. They are faint on. And then, like, it goes into, like, wow, judgment on Babylon and Babylonia. And this is the last one before the recapping of how they sacked Jerusalem. But it's long, and 2 chapters. And that starts with like the word of the Lord spoke against Babylon and against the land of the Chaldeans by Jeremiah the prophet. Declare among the nations, proclaim and set up. But actually, I missed one. Elam. The word of the Lord that came to Jeremiah the prophet against Elam in the beginning of the reign of Zedekiah, king of Judah, saying, thus says the Lord of hosts. So look, I did notice. The word of the Lord that came to Jeremiah the prophet against Elam in the beginning of the reign of Zedekiah, king of Judah, saying, thus says the Lord of hosts. So for some reason, he sneaks in. That is the end of that one, because now you have a different, right, judgment on Elam. It's tied into, like, whatever's going to come right after it, right? And what came right before it, it's just in there with the other ones. It's just, behold, I will break the bow of Elam, the foremost of their might against Elam. I will bring the four winds from the four quarters of heaven and scatter them towards all those winds. There shall be no nations where the outcasts of Elam will not go. Blah, blah, blah. Fierce anger, but it shall come to pass in the latter days I will bring back the captives of Elam, says the Lord. And, well, right. Then there's, like, a Babylonian god, sometimes spelled Marduk, or whatever, you know, like on the bottom. So who the fuck knows what's there, right? And, like, then it goes into the judgment on Babylon and Babylonia. The word that the Lord spoke against Babylon and against the land of the Chaldeans by Jeremiah the prophet. That's all it says. And then it is like the end of the world one proper again. You even know, because like if I flip through it and just try and find like anything, I don't know, I'll find something for you. It's long. I mean, there's plenty of stuff that says like the whole earth. And for she's not healed, forsake her. Let us go everyone to his own country. For her judgments reaches to heaven and is lifted up to the skies. The Lord has revealed our righteousness. Come and let us declare in Zion. Make the arrows bright, gather the shields. The Lord has raised up the spirit of the kings of the Medes, for his plan is against Babylon to destroy it. Because it is the vengeance of the Lord, the vengeance for his temples. Set up the standard on the walls of Babylon. I don't know here. I don't really want to find whatever I'm probably going to find on this page, right? Babylon shall become a heap, a dwelling place for jackals, an astonishment and a hissing without an inhabitant. They shall roar together like lions or whatever. Oh, how Shishak is taken. Hang on. I mean, there is stuff about it, but if I just read it, right, like in the next thing, we'll find it, you know what I mean? There's stuff that says, like, the whole earth, like, yeah, there's stuff that, like, it's clearly not about back then. It's about, like, this one, you know what I mean? Because it basically ends with, like, you know, the sound of a cry comes from Babylon and great destruction from the land of the Chaldeans, because the Lord is plundering Babylon and silencing her loud voice. So her waves roar like great waters, and the noise of their voice is uttered, because the plunderer comes against her, against Babylon, and her mighty men are taken. Every one of their bows is broken, for the Lord is the God of recompense. He will surely repay. Now, don't you understand, like, we get Babylon as a region and a great destruction from the land of the Chaldeans, because, like, by Iraq, basically. But, like, you know, Babylon also has this other meaning with, like, mean people who identify as, like, they're Babylon, the whole or whatever. And then there's, like, the terrible ones in the territory of wicked, and, like, what's this Elam thing? And why is it there? And then, like, it goes right back into it. And from what time is this? When is it? It's like, it's a bit of a mishbag. That's true. Like, he just sort of, like, it's Yahweh. It's an ultimate vent. And it's verbatim how, like, Jeremiah ends. Because he's, like, an angry prophet about it. You know what I mean? He even, like, says, like, there's a whole, like, poem for no reason in the middle of it where, like, whoa, like, cursed be the people who even, like, congratulated my parents that they weren't, like, having a baby when I was conceived. Because, like, he just wanted to die, and, like, we wished he was never born, and, like, he was depressed and his life sucked. And then in the end, they didn't listen to him. And well, like, right, they decimated that place. So that's what happened. Anyway, this is your intro, and now I'm going to read it. You've got 25 minutes here, and we'll have probably another like 35 minutes tops reading it. It's just it's like 6 or 7 chapters, I guess, but it's like a couple of them are long. So I would imagine I'll be reading for like a 35 minute thing. I can post this, have a cig, and I'll be back. And USA, Key West, or whatever. Yeah. Look at that shirt. I'm an American. Fight for your rights, fight for what's right. Why don't they? Like, when you forget a right to be believed and not believed, because that can cut both ways. They see how it's clever to the pathological liar, too. You have a right to be, you know, they'll say that. But, like, you know, on that level, or like the Kamala level, you know, both levels, two-faced. But, like, why don't you just say, like, we have a right to free speech and free press immediately and without hesitation? And, like, you know, we have a right. You don't understand? It's not an option to, like, suggest maybe, you know, blah, blah. That's not going to fly in America, all right? We don't give a damn about, like, whatever they're doing in, like, Mideastville or, like, Tinkletown or this place or that place or, like, you know, the Hindu one or the Chinese one. And they're like, we got to worry about our own stuff, all right? And what do you mean the mafia took over Mexico? That's our neighbors. Even Canada seems mean about it these days. Like, why though? Really? Like, let's just, like, America should worry about America first, and then, like, once we have our own freedom back, like, let's not hate each other ever again about it. And then, like, we can help the other countries who are dealing with the same crazies, all right? It's a global initiative, a new world order, we tell you. I'm going to read it a little creepy just to have fun with it, but I'll get it verbatim. All right, see ya.